now you're going to call the parse mutable going to be parse mutable client configuration. There you go. And this is how you declare a closure. So in other words, this is similar to using Python's lambda function. So we're passing the variable configuration into our function as a parameter. And now we just have to initialize the configuration. We need to get the ID of the server and as well as the address. So we're going to call configuration dot application ID equals to CodePath parse. Perfect. And your next step is going to be configuration dot server equal to, I'll just copy and paste it, it's too long. It's a web address, so type that out. Hopefully it works. HTTP 45.79.67.127:137 parse. Cool. So after you guys have that, it should be giving us a valid, parse configuration. I have to type that out. So make sure that it's typed. You know how it's highlighted? It was highlighted. You gotta make sure that it's actually typed in. And now, why is it giving me an error? There's no accessible initializers. Let me type this up.
Don't you want parse the client configuration, not the mutable?
Oh yeah, you're right. Thank you for catching that. Make sure it's parse client configuration. There you go. So now we're gonna have, this is how we're telling our application to connect to the server called CodePath parse, and it's located under this server address. So that's how you initialize it. So what would be the next step now? Now that we have our parse initialized, now let's go ahead and implement the login functionality. So go back into your storyboard, and you're going to notice that we have a login view controller. So we want to implement the functionality that gets the username and the password. And after you click on the login button, it should call the parse and tell it to log in that user. Or if we click on sign up, sign up a user. So actually, let's sign up a user instead. So go into your view controller, and if you want to go onto your storyboard, you'll notice that this is called the login view controller. So you can find it here under the controller folder. And what the heck? It already has some code in it. Wow, I think you guys already everything in it. You know what? Delete all this. Don't look at that. I want you guys to know what's going on. So you guys know what's happening in every step. So I have the first function, which is a sign up button, and then the on login function. Let's implement first the on sign up. So this is what you're going to need for your on sign up button. First, we gotta check that we don't give the server invalid inputs. So in other words, blank text. So for that, I already did that for you guys. I created a function that checks that the text fields are not empty. So all you have to do is just implement this function first. So in order to call it, you would do a simple if statement saying if username and password not empty. There you go. That's the function that I created for you guys. So if those text fields are not empty, now we're gonna do all the heavy duty parse work into our code. We're gonna first create a user object for parse. And to call it, it's gonna be a PF user. So here we're initializing a PF user object. PF is basically parse. So it's a part of parse's library attributes. And now that we have our object, every new user needs at least two things, a username and a password. So first we need to retrieve the username and the password from the text fields. So in order to do that, I'm gonna call the new user dot username equal to username text field dot text. So here we're setting the object PF user, and after we initialize it, now we have to give it the username. So what's the username of this new user that we just created? Well, it's going to be the username text field dot text. Now we're going to do the same thing for the password. New user dot password equals username password text field dot text. So after we set the user properties, now we need to create the user. So we're gonna have to implement a method from parse that will call the server and create our new user and save it within the server. So to do that, you're gonna call your new user dot sign up in background. And inside it, you're gonna create it's gonna be another function within as a parameter, and it's gonna have success, bool, or it could return an error as an error. And oh, I forgot this is supposed to be a curly bracket. My bad. There you go. So it should listen. Let me just do it again. It's going to be a curly bracket, and then you're going to have success. Bool, or the error, and there you go. Now we're going to implement the functionality within. So if we have a, so we're working with a closure. So what we want to tell our app is, if we get a success, then okay, just print out something like, oh, it was safe, or take you to the view controller, right, the home feed. Or if there was an error, then print out an error. So in order to do that, we're going to do our own if statement. If let error equal error, then we're going to print the error, and then self display sign up error. Oops. Self.display sign up error. So the only thing that I implemented for you guys is this display sign up error. So it's a function all the way down here. And all it does is that it blurs your background and it shows you an alert. Like when you do something on your phone and you click on save contact, it'll pop up a little window that says success or alert. So that's what we're doing. We're just passing the error as a parameter. And now we're going to do the same for if it succeeded, then we're going to print that we successfully created the user, just to let us know that we were able to create it. And we're going to do the user new user dot username was created, was registered. So this is just a new message to me to let know that I was able to create a user. And then we're going to perform the segue. with identifier, and then it's gonna be segues dot authenticated. So I know this, if you guys recall from what you've been working on, this is supposed to be a string. So all I did is that I created a helper file with constants, and this is basically segue authenticated is a string. It's literally just a string that says authenticated. But when you do professional coding, you want to store strings as constants so that you can avoid spelling mistakes. Because when you create a string, they'll tell you if you have it will never autocomplete it, and besides that, it won't tell you if there's a spelling mistake because it's a string. Swift doesn't care about strings. So we're gonna do everything in constants. But just to let you know, heads up, if you're confused about what is this, it's just a string. So now, what is it you doing? So if we create a new user, it's gonna take us to the next view controller, right? Well, let's try it out. Let's see if it works. Actually, I think it'll give us an error because we still have to do the table view. But let's see what happens. There you go. Let's see if this builds at least. Yeah, we still have to construct our messages. Well, before that, let's construct our login functionality. Let's say that we already have a user. Well, lucky for you, guess what? This is mostly going to be the same exact code, right? So the only difference is going to be this function. The signup, instead of signup, it's going to be login. So let's do that. I'm going to teach you how to be efficient in your coding. You guys want to know the trick? You highlight everything, you copy it, and then you paste it. Nice, right? Because we're doing essentially the same thing. But now, instead of creating a signup, we're going to be doing a login. So all you have to do is look at this function right here, this method, and change it to login. Login with username. Cool. And the rest should be the same. Oh, make sure that instead of new user, since we're not creating a user, make sure to take out the new user, and this will be PF user. Why? Because we don't need to create a new user object. That user already exists in the server if we're logging in, right? So what we're doing is we're calling whatever user that exists there and log in with that username. And then you just, instead of new user.username, you're going to change to let constants. Let username and let password, and then this should, after you build it, it should get rid of that error. No? Log in. Oh, so in here we're going to change the, yeah, actually you're going to have to do a couple things here. Let me go ahead and delete all this. And what you're going to do is you're going to call this function pfuser.login with username. It should be I think it's the third one. Yeah, the third option. Login with username and background. And then for the string, it's going to be the user, the username. And the password is going to be the password that you need. And then inside here, you're going to create another curly bracket because we're going to have a closure. And it should be user, which is a PF user. And the error. And after you type this, make sure you type the in to tell it that it's a closure. Do you guys have this so far? So what we got to do with this now is, so essentially what is this function doing? It's logging in the user, and it's going to return two things. It can either return a user, So that's why we put the question mark to signify that it's an optional, because we don't know if that user actually exists or it doesn't. And we have an error, which is also an optional, because we don't know if we're gonna get an error. So after we set up those things, now we do the same as above. If let error equal error. If we get an error, then print login failed. And let's give it the error message that we want. Error.localize description. And then we're going to display that error. Display login error with the parameter error being error. Else, if there was no error returned, then print logged in successfully. And we're going to perform the segue with identifier. Same thing, segues dot authenticated. And for the center, we're gonna do nil. Whoops.
This one,
Which part, which line?
where you put a login fail.
Thank you. I'm reading an error here. Cannot call non-function type string. Oh, there you go. Cool. And login optional. Is it because I don't? Where did I? Oh, it's because I missed the count of the brackets. So for this one, this is one. Yeah, this one should be for this one. Okay. Force and wrap what? Oh, the username and password? Oh, yeah, don't forget to force and wrap these. My bad. Because if you're doing a let, then you have to give it a text for sure. And it's okay, because we already have a function that checks if the inputs are empty or not. Question?
So when you say there's an error, does that mean the credentials are wrong, or there's just an error in accessing the parse server?
That will return you either or. So if there was an error with that's why you have an error as a parameter, because parse will return you an error, which can be either wrong credentials or a problem with the network connection. Maybe there's no internet, but parse will do that for you. All it knows is that you're telling your app to give you an error back, and parse will give you that specific error. And why is it still giving me an error here?
Do you need that last parentheses?
Oh, it goes before. There we go. Probably not. Okay, there we go. Yeah, you were right about the parentheses. Cool. When you do closures, it is a bit tricky. So make sure if you guys have any questions or get lost, let me know so that you can get help and I'll give you some time. Is everyone good now? There's no mistakes here? Awesome. So now that we have our login and sign up functionality, now we can have the user passed into our navigation controller, which will show us the messages that we're actually talking to. So now we're going to implement some of the basic message functionality. So let's go ahead and go to our other view controller, which is the chat view controller. This is where we're going to handle all the messages that are retrieved. So the first thing we need to do, we need to create an array that will store the messages locally. So I would call it messages. And it's going to be an array of, I forgot what it was. PF object. That's what it is.
Where's PF object coming from?
From parse.
Okay.
PF object is an attribute of parse. If you go into documentation, you can check out more stuff that they have there. But right now we're just going over the basics. So we're creating the array for the messages where we're going to store them and then use that array to display it on the table. Now that we have our array, we have to create an object that knows what a message is. And in order to do that, I'm going to create one myself. And it's going to be called letMessage equal to PF object class name message. So now it knows what type of object we're accessing, because in CodePath servers, since they already created all of this stuff for us, they created the object for us, we just need to know what class it is. And the class that they created it through their tutorials is called message. So we're letting our app know that a chat message is going to be an object of a class message. And these messages are going to be stored in our messages variable. But now we need to figure out how do we retrieve those messages. So I already had added the functions that you guys need to fill out. So let's go ahead and do some querying. So this is the fun stuff. So now that you guys know how to send users to the database, now let's get to know how to retrieve stuff from the database. So in order to retrieve them, we're going to create a query. So I'm going to create an object called query, and it's going to be a PF query with a class name, and let's call it UCI CodePath. So what we're going to be doing here is we're creating our own group chat for this very classroom. So when you guys create this, you guys will be able to chat with each other through our own little group chat application. So this is going to be like our room, the room that we're all chatting in, UCI CodePath. So now that we have our query, we have to tell parse how we want to retrieve them. So we want them in descending order, right? We want the most recent messages displayed on top. So in order to do that, you're going to have a method called add descending order, and we're going to retrieve those based on the created date, so that we're going to get the reverse. So we're getting the most recent messages on top rather than at the bottom. In order to do that, you're going to access the method of each message has a couple things, right? It has the user who sent it, and the message, and the other attribute is the created app. So we're going to be querying all the messages based on the date that it was sent. So now that we have the order of the messages, now we're going to retrieve the limit and how many messages we want to get. In this case, we'll just do 20 so that our system doesn't crash by loading too many messages. And in query, now we want to know who sent the message. So in order to do that, we have to say query include key user. That way we know who sent us the message. And last but not least, now we need to call the query and send it to parse and see if parse can retrieve anything. So we're going to do query.find objects in background, and it's going to be a closure which contains messages or an error. And in this closure, we're going to say, all right, if there's messages, then we're going to make the array of messages equal messages. And then we're going to load, and what do you have to do after you get an array of something? Reload the table view. Awesome.
Your parameter in the parentheses doesn't have a name.
Oh, it's because I misspelled it. There we go.
Cool.
So now, if we try to retrieve, when we run it, it's not gonna return us any messages because we haven't sent anything. So let's add the functionality to send messages to our app, to the server. I mean. So go to your onSend function and let's retrieve the message first. So retrieve if message text field dot text is empty equals false. So here we're just saying if the text field is not empty, then we're going to convert that message and send that to the server. So let's go ahead and implement. We're going to create our chat message object. Chat message equal to a PF object of class name. And what are we calling it again? UCI CodePath. So we have our chat message object, and now we're going to add some stuff to it. So remember that the chat message object has attributes that we need to fill in. It has a user who sent it, the message, and when it was sent. So let's add some of those attributes to it. So we're going to access the text attribute, and that is going to be equal to the message text field. Message text field dot text. Cool. And make sure to force unwrap that. And chat message, the user is equal to the PF user dot current. So this is how we parse who's the user right now. You access the PF user dot current, and this will retrieve the current user that is logged in into your app. And then we simply do it now we tell parse to save the message in the server. So we're going to call the chat message. Oops. Dot save in background. And it's going to be another closure with a either success or an error. And now, if it was successful, then we just print message saved. Else, if left, error equal error, then we just print the problems saving message, just to let us know what's happening. And let's print the error so we know exactly what went wrong. And then, after we send the message, if it was successful, let's add another thing. If it was successful, let's reset the text field. You do self.message text field dot text equals blank, just the blank string. That way it'll reset the text field after you click on the send button. And let's tell the user that it cannot be empty. So I'll put an else statement down here. Else print message cannot be empty. Cool. All right, and the rest we'll do the logout afterwards. Right now, let's test it out. Let's see if it works. So let's run it. If you guys can run it with me, and let's start texting each other, and let's see our app come to life. And you will have successfully built your first messenger, like using parse. So let's try signing up. So everyone, I want you guys to create your own account and just put like a short name of yourself or your actual name. And I'm gonna go ahead and sign up myself. Cool, so I was able to sign up. Were you guys able to sign up? Try it. And I will send a message to you guys right now. Hello, class. Whoops, alright, we have something that failed. Let's see what happened. May not have class, you are texting. So it's probably on the on-send. Oh, it's because I gave it the label. So make sure you do the dot text on your message text field. Right here. It's on the on-send function. Make sure that it's the message text field dot text. I forgot to put that in. But let's try it again. Let's try memo again. Oh, so I already created my account, so all I have to do is just type my login instead. Awesome. So I logged in.